What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So every now and then we'll see a patent show up online that gets the internet speculating whether it's from Microsoft, Nintendo, or Sony. Well, yesterday one strange patent did appear online from Sony that got people talking about the idea of another PlayStation handheld. We'll go over that one here today. Also, we are be talking about Phil Spencer and some comments that he had around the rumored project Spartacus from Sony. And we'll also be taking a trip back to the early 2000s with another impossible port that's been made public for the Game Boy Advance. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all the uploads here on the channel. And we're going to start today with Final Fantasy VI, specifically Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster. We heard that it had been delayed out of December into February, so next month. And now we have the ESRB rating for it, which is great because if you were concerned that it could be delayed further, seeing this rating should at least put those concerns to rest. We can see the rating here coming in at a teen rating as expected for Final Fantasy VI, and they have been releasing these Final Fantasy games one at a time. 6 is the last one they were going to be doing. Remember, we also saw the screenshots of what looked like almost HD 2D visuals at different points in the game, so we'll see a bit more about this one when it releases next month, and if we have some of that HD 2D integration in for parts, almost making it that borderline remaster remake kind of thing. But obviously people are going to be wondering if this will be heading to consoles now that they have released the last one on PC here, and I do expect them to show up on consoles at some point this year. My only question is, will it be on a single cartridge or disc, like if it's on the PlayStation or the Switch, or if it will just be a broken up digital release title by title? I'm hoping Square shows up with all of them on a single cartridge or a single disc and we can buy them physically. Also, we do know that Kirby and the Forgotten Land will be releasing March 25th, and now we know how large the game will be on release, and this was updated on the Nintendo eShop page, which we can see here at the bottom, coming in at 5.8 gigabytes. That's, again, seemed to surprise some people, and that's just kind of how it is with the Switch. I feel like we should be used to it by now, specifically with Nintendo first-party games. They seem to make a concerted effort to keep the file size within reason, especially compared to other games in the space. I mean, we're so used to seeing games that are 50, 60, 70 gigabytes in size. When we see something like, I remember Mario Odyssey had that whole controversy around the file size coming in like 5.5 gigabytes. People thought there was something wrong with the game, or it was really short or small. No, Nintendo's just really been working to get these file sizes down, and it makes sense considering the Switch only has 32 gigabytes of storage. It would be very weird if they released a game necessarily that was 30, 40, 50 gigabytes, and they couldn't fit it on a cartridge that, that they want to publish, or of course get it on the 32 gigabyte storage for the Switch itself. So good to hear that when Kirby releases, it won't be filling up all of our SD card or anything. Oh, and it appears that we had the release date for Shadow Warrior 3 leak out a bit early on the Microsoft Xbox Store, which we can see the release date here, coming in at March 1st. In fact, they also have pre-order bonuses where apparently the Shadow Warrior 3 pre-order bundle, it's priced at $49.99. We'll just give you access to Shadow Warrior 1 and 2. So if you haven't played those, you can technically pre-order this, although I don't know why you would pre-order it without having played the first two, knowing that you would then want to play the third one. Anyway, if you've been curious about the series, Shadow Warrior is a blast. I really enjoy it. It's very over-the-top, first-person action-oriented, but I have a blast with them, and I'm looking forward to 3. Pretty cool to see it drop in there March 1st, although I'm already going to be very busy going through February, and then obviously towards the end of February, there's a lot of releases happening. So it's starting to really fill up this first quarter of 2022 for what I think is going to be a massive year in gaming overall. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with a patent from Sony that got the internet speculating heavily around a potential re-entry into the handheld gaming space for Sony. And we'll talk about patents at times because it's pretty cool to see some of the ideas that these companies have, especially on like the lead up to release for something like the Joy-Con. Remember like the hinged Joy-Con that Nintendo was playing around with different drawings and ideas for functionality? Well, take a look at this here because I actually think this is a cool idea in general, especially when it comes down to being able to transport controllers or maybe even a handheld device. We can see this is for a collapsible control stick. Now, this was made public on the 13th of January, but it was filed last year, June 22nd. And what appears to be shown here in this diagram is a control stick like you'd be using normally on, say, your DualSense controller or even your PS4 controller, and it appears that it would actually sync into the base of the control stick. So it would, I guess, be flat at that time to the controller. And if you think about some of the handhelds that Sony has done, I mean, with the PSP, they tried to make that thumbstick as flat as possible to the system itself. The Vita, obviously, they wanted to have ones that would travel a bit more freely, more like an actual controller, because they were trying to bring kind of the console experience to the handheld. And then I guess here the idea may be, oh, if Sony is exploring the idea of another handheld, that you would be able to play the game normally, and then if you have to store your handheld, you'd be able to push these down, the joysticks, and they'll then be flat with the front face of that system. There are quite a few drawings, by the way, of how they would accomplish this in different methods. Like one's like spring-loaded, one locks into different heights, and maybe it's them even coming up with different ways to come up with like a pro controller or Elite controller for the PS5 itself. Looking at this though, as people were like, oh, that sounds like something to be cool for a handheld. I don't think Sony's going back to the handheld space. Nintendo technically left the handheld space. They do a hybrid system now, the console and handheld that's kind of merged together. So I don't know why Sony would be like, oh, we definitely got to go back to handheld now. I actually look at this as maybe something they're playing around with for a future iteration for their PlayStation home console, just a new controller of some kind, or they were just kicking around the idea and they're like, hey, let's put a patent on this thing just so no one tries to steal this exact way that we are accomplishing this. I don't know. Would you want your controller to have the option of your control sticks sinking into it? I kind of feel like I might be playing a really serious game, like, you know, like a serious match in, well, I would say Halo, but in like Call of Duty or something like that. And then you go to press down, maybe to melee, and it just drops right into the controller itself. I feel like there are things they'd have to work out here, but I guess the concept is pretty cool for being able to store or transport your controller even in a pocket or a backpack or something. Also, the initial diagram they show is for a controller. So no, I wouldn't read into this as anything else, especially not a handheld from Sony. Next up, let's talk about Project Spartacus, which has been going around a lot in conversation over the last couple of weeks, as we're sort of just hanging out waiting for this to be shown from Sony and figure out where we are when it comes to backwards compatibility and, of course, the library of games that would be presented from older PlayStation systems. Well, with IGN, Phil Spencer did have a conversation, and it did lead into what he thought about Sony maybe pursuing their own Game Pass competitor. This is what he had to say. I don't mean it to sound like we've got it all figured out, but I think the right answer is allowing your customers to play the games they want to play, where they want to play them, and giving them choice about how they build their library and being transparent with them about what our plans are in terms of our PC initiatives and our cross-gen initiatives and other things. So when I hear others doing things like Game Pass or coming to PC, it makes sense to me because I think that's the right answer. I like it because it feeds our energy on what are the next things that we should be working on as we continue to build out the things that we've done in the past, because I think the right answer is to ship great games, ship them to PC, ship them on console, ship them on cloud, make them available day one in the subscription, and I expect that's what our competitor will do. Oh, that's interesting. So do we really believe that Sony would get to a point where they would put their day one releases? So let's say Horizon Forbidden West coming out, it drops into Project Spartacus. No, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. These games simply cost too much money to create, and it's pretty obvious that Sony isn't necessarily like, oh, let's just do Game Pass Ultimate ourselves. I mean, they could. They have, obviously, the talented studios to be able to put up those massive games that would get people to sign up, but would it actually be sustainable in the long run? I think Sony does understand that subscription services are important right now as we move more and more towards everyone just being connected with their systems, right? Where internet's basically something that's expected when you buy a console now. So Sony looking at that saying, you know what, we probably should have a subscription service that we can pretty much plant our flag in, and that, I guess, would be Project Spartacus. I think they're going to lean more into their older library of games, their systems, kind of like what Nintendo does with their subscription service, where they give you Nintendo 64 games when they feel like it, Super Nintendo games when they feel like it, and all that. And then they say, hey, this is how it's worth $50 a year, and then of course online play is tacked on. I also wonder if people in general want that all subscription future. Like I see Game Pass Ultimate as being convenient. It's a great way to try out games you may not have tried out before, but I still like to buy different games, especially physically, and have them in my collection. I don't know if I would want to get to an all Netflix future where you're not able to buy any of these games. I think we'll always be able to buy games digitally, as even on Game Pass, you can buy them. You even get a discount of like 10% or something. But an all digital future where it's just subscription services, I don't know, that'd be an interesting thing to see. I don't believe Nintendo will really ever get to that point because they are extremely stubborn, and Sony just can't do it because of how expensive these games are to make. So maybe Phil Spencer's talking 20 years into the future. Who knows what game is going to look like then, but at least right now for Xbox, that's their plan, and they're hoping or expecting even, apparently, their competitors to do the same at some point. Next up, let's talk about an awesome Game Boy Advance port that was shown off recently, and people have been trying it out. MVG made a video yesterday on it, and I was taking a look at it, and it is awesome to see the Game Boy Advance be able to do this because the system wasn't designed with 3D in mind at all. In fact, if you go back and look at it, there were some 3D games, but for the most part, you would get really cool 2D games or like the isometric view. Well, how about Tomb Raider? Take a look at this. This was posted up by Xproger. It's OpenLARA on the Game Boy Advance. It's the alpha. Now, OpenLARA is an open source engine for classic Tomb Raider, and people have ported it to all kinds of things. It's been on like the Switch, even the 3DO apparently, the Xbox 360 and so on. But in this video, you can see the game playing on a Game Boy Advance. It's not like playing the best, not at all like what you would see on a PlayStation 1 or something. It's playing like 10, 15, 20 frames per second at best, and apparently 3 levels are currently playable in this alpha. But seeing the Game Boy Advance be able to do this is really impressive, especially when you look at the actual Tomb Raider game that released on the Game Boy Advance. I think it was back in 2002. It's like an isometric looking game. It's not at all like how we see here, where this looks like, I guess, even lower resolution version of the PS1 classic Tomb Raider game. Apparently a lot of work had to go into this when it came to optimization, and even taking advantage of different parts in the Game Boy Advance that weren't really meant to do those things, but it's still really cool to see that older systems still have a lot of life left in them, like the Game Boy Advance. I would check out MVG's video for a bit more info on this. However, if you have a Game Boy Advance flash card, you can play this. It's released completely, the alpha, and it's certainly something I would check out. I'm gonna actually take a look on the Analog Pocket. I have one of those flash carts I can drop in there, and apparently try out the full Tomb Raider, or 3 levels of the full Tomb Raider from back in the day on the Game Boy Advance. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about a trademark renewal that was spotted online and of course stirred up a ton of nostalgia, and that's for Psygnosis, and obviously a lot of speculation as well. But take a look at this tweet here. This was from Roberto saying, a trademark of Psygnosis logo has been registered and renewed December 1st, 2021 on US. Well known for Amiga titles like Lemmings and Wipeout, Lula World, G Police on PlayStation, so on. Now, they did turn in or rebranded as Studio Liverpool. That was at the end of the 90s, so we have not seen this Psygnosis logo used since basically 2000. Now, the reason people are looking at this, even though it's, I think, business as usual for Sony, you typically have to re-up these different trademarks after so many years. But the reason this is coming up is because of a recent acquisition by Sony, that's Firesprite. That's actually where a lot of the different developers and staff from Studio Liverpool went. They formed Firesprite, they made some different games, some of them VR games, and then Sony came in, bought them, and now they're working on Horizon Call of the Mountain for PlayStation VR 2. So I think some were hoping, oh, will they be reusing that OWL logo that many of us throughout the 90s grew up to really like seeing just pop up, and then, okay, here comes Wipeout or something like that. I don't think so. I just feel like Sony owns the trademark. They just want to continue owning it, maybe just in case you never know, maybe they do want to revive it someday, as they do have the developers basically from Psygnosis to Studio Liverpool to Firesprite, now back to Sony. So, I mean, you can always hope. I just think this is them covering all their bases and making sure it is renewed. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a little poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, do you own a PlayStation Vita? 30% said yes, 70% said no, and there's your answer why Sony is probably not going to be making another handheld ever again. The Vita just did not do well, especially after the PSP, which was like in the 80 million unit range when it came to sold PSPs. massive downtrend for the Vita. And a lot of that had to do with the PlayStation 4 taking off, Sony realizing they were gonna have to figure out how to split their studios, and it was probably more lucrative to have their first-party studios develop for the PlayStation 4 rather than the Vita, and that was kind of it. It's a shame because the Vita is a very impressive piece of hardware for the time. I mean, it released back in the early 2011 with an OLED display. Is a very powerful system for its time. Had some pretty cool features like the back touch panel. Had Near, which was an interesting social app at the time. So it's a shame because I think the Vita could have done some really cool things years and years after launch, but Sony was pretty much ready to move on like after a first year or two. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Kale saying, I wish Sony would just do what Xbox does and let you run your PS1, PS3 discs. Yes, they would have to have emulators, but there's no reason why they couldn't. Well, the interesting thing about the PS5 and technically the PS4 is they don't like play CDs at all. It's very odd. Like you figure, okay, it plays DVDs, plays Blu-rays. Like you put a music CD in, it doesn't read it. So, I mean, the PS1 is on CDs, so maybe that's something Sony could work out there. I saw people mentioning that like they should release a separate attachment for it because they even have a PS5 digital system, so you wouldn't be able to use the disc in there anyway. I don't think Sony wants to get involved even with extra hardware to hold this thing up. We're having a hard time just getting them to do backwards compatibility in the first place. I don't know if they want to R&D a little disk drive that you buy as well. So I'm hoping at least they have native backwards compatibility for the PlayStation 3, but I'm still kind of leaning towards it being all streamed through the cloud. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's Sony's patent for collapsible thumbsticks? What do you think of that idea? Or what about Phil Spencer's comments on Project Spartacus? Will Sony ever release their big first-party games into the subscription service day one? And then what about Tomb Raider on the Game Boy Advance? Let me know if you got a chance to try it out. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.